Good afternoon. My name is Benjamin Brainard, and I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about a article that I read this week called "Reforming Harvard" by Kenneth McKenna, I believe is how you pronounce that. Um, Before I talk about it, I want to talk a little bit about why I chose the article. Now, the reason I chose the article is because when I was in my undergraduate, I went to a school in Canada called Briarcrest College and Seminary, and while I was there, we were going through the same process of how do we get provincially authorized degrees rather than just theological degrees. And there was a lot of talk back and forth among the students. I was in student leadership, and Cotton Mather's name came up quite a bit. So I figured, well, I'll lean into that and take a look at what Mathers had to say. So to tell you a little bit about the article, Mathers laid out 12 points about how to reform Harvard and keep it a Puritan institution rather than a liberal institution. Some of the points, very good. Some of them I'm not a huge fan of personally. For example, one of his points that I wasn't a big fan of, he was quite restrictive of what would go in the school library if he were to take the presidency. So he wanted to remove books he deemed satanic. But he also had some really good points about student professor interactions and the emphasis on maintaining a Calvinistic perspective on salvation. So I think there's a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to understanding Cotton Mathers. So one of the main conclusions of the article was that had Cotton Mathers actually been approved as president of Harvard, it's likely that the institution would have remained a Puritan institution and stayed to its Christian roots rather than going down this track of liberalism. So I also looked at a few other articles to get a bit of a bigger picture, a different perspective. So I looked at one entitled The First Century of the American Colleges, 1636 to 1740. And I looked at another one entitled A Sketch of the Theological Development of the Harvard University. The first article there really laid out the controversy between Mathers and the guy that actually became president, Leavitt. And it really is a pro-Leavitt piece and an anti-Mathers piece, and kind of showed that under Leavitt's tenure, the school expanded, degrees were authorized. At one point, it mentions the same degree that's mentioned in the Reforming Harvard article, where a student received a master's degree after studying French and economics rather than theology, as a positive, where the school started to be recognized for something more than just ministers. The next degree, I should say, article I looked at, kind of had that same train that said the theological development under Leavitt pulled the institution away from its Puritan roots, more towards an Anglican understanding, as a means of getting that authorized status that the school was looking for. Now, my thoughts on it. I think Mathers is both the savior of Christian education and maybe the villain. Some of his points, like student-teacher interaction and the commitment to good doctrine, phenomenal. But others, I'm afraid, I think they would have resulted in Harvard maintaining its Puritan roots, but ultimately closing its doors from a lack of students that could do something other than become ministers. And that's kind of my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours, and I hope you all have a great weekend.